I should look at the Panoptica options and things in Canvas, I suppose. It might make better videos, but these have the advantage. What?
That requires
It does require Flash. And Flash, I've always hesitated to do that. Flash is a security hole from hell. So.
And Octo and the fact that like the newbies use it is the main reason why I grudgingly installed Crash Player on that. Otherwise, I just did not install.
So I wonder. So probably on like an iPad or something, which absolutely refuses to allow Flash, or wouldn't run.
Flash is being deprecated by Adobe anyway.
Yeah. 2020. Yet another reason why 2020 can't come soon enough.
Well, HTML5 was a effort by Google and others to kill Flash.
There's a whole cartoon which is like a brief history of Adobe Flash that's really funny. Basically, it starts like I'm the greatest thing, and eventually it just shows like a drunken, beleaguered Flash player talking to a homeless Internet Explorer.
Well, it was a way to animate initially. Microsoft developed their own kind of Silverlight, yeah, version of Flash. I'm not sure. Some people used it. Netflix does it.
Yeah.
I don't know if they still do. Yeah.
I don't think they still do. Maybe they do.
Maybe they do. I mean, Netflix. The interface. I mean, you can do some pretty sophisticated things with that, but you could with Flash too. But with Silverlight is basically XML and C#.
Oh.
So, which is actually a pretty good description of the entire .NET platform. It's mostly XML and C#. All right, so I'm going to do, let's just do miles per gallon. You guys did this before. And we'll do it as a class. Kind of to your question, if I were just to do this on my own, I wouldn't bother making a class out of this because it's just simpler to write a function, right? But I want to show you just sort of how a class would work. And this will be really close to the assignment, which is basically make a tip calculator. So, so we'll do this as a class. And like as I said, classes really just become important when you're building complicated applications, and also when you want something that you're building something that you want to reuse in a lot of different places. A class is good for that. Python also has things called modules, which are basically just collections of functions. I mean, that's another way you can reuse them. But a lot of the world is still pretty object-oriented, and it's good to get a sense of objects, because this is actually not a Python class per se. It's supposed to be a computer concepts, beginning programming class. So I want to get the other programming concepts down, and as I said, classes are things that you'll encounter in most languages. All right, so I'm going to, let's just do a def class. Is it def class? I believe it is.
I think it's just class.
I think it might just be class. I think the def is just for functions. So we'll call it class mileage. Okay. And then I'm going to do an init. Do you guys remember what the init is? Right. And in most languages, what it's called is a constructor, because it constructs, it actually puts the class together. And we're going to pass in, I think we have to pass in self, right? And then we'll just pass in the other things that we need are basically the total miles. So I'll just say miles. And then we need the gallons that were used, the number of gallons that were used. Now you could make this more interesting if you wanted to pass in the price per gallon and things, and you could see how much it costs you per mile and all sorts of weird little things. So you could make this a little bit more. So, and it's definite, right? For some reason, my brain is not here yet. And probably I need a space there. All right, so I'm going to say self dot miles equals miles. And what the self is doing there initially is it's differentiating between the internal and the external one. They do not have to have the same name. I do it this way because the book does it this way, and also Java tends to do this a lot, where it just basically it distinguishes between the local variable and the other by using, in Java they would use this instead of self. This miles equals miles. It means the internal miles, the local miles, is equal to the one coming in as a parameter. And then we'll do self dot gallons equal gallons. So when you initialize this class, you have to pass it the miles and the gallons. And as I said, we could make this a lot more complicated if we want, but I want to keep it kind of simple. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So let's do another function. I'm going to, this, as I said, this would all be, you could do this in a single function. This is overkill to make a class, but let's do def. Well, let's just call it miles per gallon, MPG. And we won't pass anything into that because we passed it into the class. So this would basically be self, I can't type, self miles divided by self.gallons, right? It might not hurt to have designated these as floats, right? But we can do that when we use the class, I guess. Let's just return. And we need to say what this is. So let's do we will return. Well, actually, what we could do is we could say, because this is actually more typical, we could say, and I think I have to pass in self. And I think I want to declare this as self as an internal variable. Does that make sense? So I'm going to do get mpg and self. One of the things, as I think I've said, I don't like much about Python's way of doing things is that you have to use that self variable for every internal. It doesn't have any true class level variables. You have to identify them as class level every time. Because if I use the self, these are accessible. Anything with the self dot is accessible to everything. Does that make sense? That's their equivalent of a class level variable. In another language, what you would do is you would declare at the top of the class, you declare miles and gallons, and then they would be accessible to every method in the class. But here what you have to do is you have to pass the self variable down through the methods. Does that make sense? Okay. So here, I'm just going to say return self dot miles per gallon. And that should be self, not selg. All right. And the reason I did that is it's typically, there's often sets and gets. You can do different things. Like if you have a set method, it allows an outside class to change your value. If you have a get method, it allows you to see it, usually return. We don't really need a set for these because we're passing them in the init. You don't have to do that. Right? The init could actually not be there, or it could have no arguments. Does that make sense? Although you might want it to do like a minimum init would be like def init self. Self.miles equals 0. That would be like a minimal thing, you know, self.gallons equals 0. And then you'd have to set it through other methods. You want to see how that would be? Have I confused you? I'll write a set method for these too, though you don't need to do this. And I'll comment it after I write it. But this would be like if you want to set the miles, you would do def set, I'm going to just say set miles, and it would take self, and it would take miles. And then inside of it, it would just be self miles equals miles. You would just do it, you just have a method which allows the user to pass in the value and change, you know, and change the internal one. Gets and sets are really common in object-oriented languages as ways of passing variables in and out. And you can control, the idea is you can control the access, because not everything has to have a set, not everything has to have a get. You can control which ones are just internal and which ones you can control the access points. I'm going to comment this because we don't really need it, although it actually won't hurt anything leaving it, so I guess I could leave it. I'm going to do another method here, and this is a built-in method, and most object-oriented languages have something like this. They usually call it toString. Python calls it string with, and those are double dashes. Not dashes, double underscores. Yeah. I wish the idle would show them as double underscores. And we want self here. Okay. And what this does is it actually just prints out, when you call the class, if you just say print the class, right, it will print out whatever is in the string. By default, if you don't actually, this is like overriding this function because every class has this built in. If you put your own string here, then you're overriding it. By default, what it reproduces is the name of the class. So this one, if we were to print it out without having written the def string self, it would just print out mileage. Right? That's the default behavior, is to just print the name of the class. But we're going to put a different string in here. And I'm not sure, do you do a print? You don't do a print in here, do you? I think you just return a string. So let's just do return. But before I do the return the string, I'm going to, well, let's just do return. And what we'll do is, so it's MPG, right? So we'll call the MPG thing there. That should work. Does that make sense? I think it makes sense. The idea is that when we call the class, if we just say print the class, it should print out the mileage. We'll have to initialize the class. We'll do this in defmain. We'll initialize the class and then we'll call it, we'll just print it and it should print out the string that we have. You guys ready or you need a minute?
I'm ready.
So I'm going back to the margin and I'm going to do def main. So this isn't part of the class. And again, classes can be part of they can be separate files. And in fact, if I were going to do anything reusable, I would make them all separate files so that they can be moved around easier. So I'm going to do, in this, what I want to do is I want to initialize. Let's do, so let's do miles. I don't know. Equals float input. How many total miles? Okay. And then I'm going to do the same with gallons. So I'm just going to say gals equals float input how many gallons. All right. Can I move this up? Hopefully those don't interfere with anything. And then I want to, basically I'll initialize the class. So I will say and I'll pass in the MLS and the gals. And I'm just going to say print mileage. And I don't want the parentheses there. And then down here, I'll just call main. So with luck, when I do this, it will return this, which will return the miles per gallon. You guys got that? I'll give it a minute. So when you call the object, when you call the class, at least in the book, it doesn't use the parentheses. I think it's because you're not printing a literal, you're kind of calling the string function on an object. It's not totally clear, but that's the way the book has it. It's without the parentheses for this, when you're calling this. I'm going to save it real quickly.
There.
Okay. Oh.
Here.
So I'm going to call it mileage class. Save it. See what happens if I run it. It doesn't like mileage. Missing parentheses. And yet, I swear, it doesn't do that here. Let's try it with parentheses. Maybe it's just a misprint in here. So let's say it's about 300 miles and 15 gallons. So it doesn't like that.
Yeah, I got more or less the same error.
So it doesn't understand miles per gallon. Why?
For me, it says local variable mileage where it's referenced before assignment.
Well, so I did that. So it just didn't like my MPG. Oh, because, well, so MPG here needs to have the word self in front of it. I think that's my only error. Then I will look at the other. And it didn't like. Must be string, not. So it did call it return your MPG is plus self MPG. Is there a toString?
I'm not getting that error, so I'm not really
Yours
sure.
worked?
No, it's not working, but I'm not getting that error. I'm getting a different error.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm wondering, let me just real quickly. Convert float to string in Python. Let's see what that does. All right, so I'm going to do. Oh, actually, let me kill that. It's off screen. I'm going to do 315. Still says none. It's not reading the MPG there. Why? Oh, you know what I want? I need to. So I'm going to do MPG. And then what I need to call is not that. Right? I need to call get MPG. Might not even have to convert it to string. Let's try it without that real quickly. See what it does. So a couple of mistakes that I made is that this needs to have a self in front of it. And when I called the MPG, it calculates it, but it doesn't return it. To see the value, I have to do this. But I need to calculate it first. So I'm going to calculate it, and then I'm going to view it. So let's see if this works, and then we'll talk through it. All right, how many total miles? 315. It still doesn't like it. Name MPG is not defined. And again, I know why. Anybody know why? Self. I hate the self variable. But we might, yeah. So it doesn't. What does it mean it doesn't have any? Usually don't have so many errors. What am I doing? What did you have? Yours worked? And just by doing that? Okay. That converts it to a string. Actually, I'm going to kill this just to get it up on the screen a little bit better. Still having an error.
Yeah, me too.
It looks like I might have spelled something wrong. So where do I get self miles per gallon equals self miles? I think in order for self miles per gallon to work, I have to initialize it. Yours worked? Oh, or I know what it is. It actually isn't even that. Notice I have an S there and no S there. So Control S, F5. Now, again, I want to kill it so I can get up to the top. All right, let's try it now. Yay! I finally got there. Yeah, I will. I will. We'll walk through it. All of my little typos and mistakes, as I said, today is not my day for. I'll come look at and see. See, you still have an error?
Yeah, 2 errors.
One of them is main. Well, actually, let's get this straight. I would do this as a lowercase m.
Mileage?
Yeah, because it can't be the same as the other one. If that makes a difference. No, the other one, the big first one is. This is a variable. This is their class.
Right.
Okay. Just run that and see if we get another error.
Same line numbers.
All right, so you get an error on.
Gallons is not that fine.
Right, because it's gallons.
Oh. So,
No, leave it alone up here. It's right here.
oh, just put the gallons here. Says attribute error mileage has no attribute get.
That's because this should be capitalized.
Oh,
Like
I see.
that's a.
That's
You have a question? It actually can't. That's one of the problems with Python. It doesn't see anything in the class unless you do something. No, you don't need to, but we do need to have self, and we need to do self dot for all those variables. Right, you still can't see the methods unless you. Unless you do self. It's a thing addressing lots by copy. It doesn't have any paths where everything has to be identified with self. What's your the mileage equals mileage? It should work. Well, you need to put self inside of that. There we go. Here's where it works. It's really hard to see.
It's giving me class main dot mileage as the MPG.
Yeah, I got that too.
What? Oh, so that means that your string thing is reading just the default. So you have the double underscore string self though, and it's just printing out. It's just printing out the
Yeah.
the mileage. That's what it does by default. Why is it doing that? That should work. And you have double underscores before and after the string.
Uh-huh.
It looks like it does. Okay. Why is it? It's like it's ignoring that. Very weird.
Because
Oh, I know why. Well, no, so you got it.
yeah.
Print M, capital M.
Oh, right, because we're not printing that,
Yeah.
we're printing that. Okay, got it.
It worked. Okay. Anyone else? Okay.
I mean,
I think I got the same error there. But that's what I got as the output.
So you got just the name of the class.
Yes, the
your miles per
output.
gallon was bound method
I think this is
mileage.
a lowercase.
Um,
No, that one is this one in the print.
oh, okay. Do this is lowercase?
Yeah. So maybe a different number. What is here? Miles per gallon. It doesn't recognize miles per gallon. Put a self dot in front of miles per gallon.
Okay.
Use of mileage is both a class and a variable. It's a little bit confusing.
Yeah.
Ah, there we go.
So,
I'm
although
still
you'll
not getting a
see
number.
that's a real common practice, I'm not sure it's a good one. Just to have the only difference between the class name and the variable name is yeah. But you don't have to do that. Like if you want it down here, you could just, I don't know what you want to name it. Could just name it M if you want it.
Yeah. I've been given crap for doing what has been called Hungarian notation. Like every single variable is meticulously named with
the type.
like the type is in the name as well as
They usually
all sorts of other stuff.
They usually say to not put the type in the name.
Yeah.
Mostly because if you have a really complicated program and a variable appears many times and then you change the type, you have to go through and change all the instances of that type. And usually you can tell the type. Now, this isn't so true with Python, but in a lot of languages, if you just mouse over a variable, it'll tell you what type it is.
You're supposed to be getting a number back.
Yes.
Because I'm still getting like, my answer is bound method mileage dot miles per gallon.
All right. So let's see what you've got in your print. You're doing self get miles per, which returns the miles per gallon, theoretically. And your miles per gallon, this trip was bound method miles per gallon. You called it get miles per.
It's not supposed to be the same function twice. You're supposed to
this one
do
should
the
call.
calculating one and then the get one.
Yeah, that one should be the calculating one up there.
This one?
Yeah. Not that. It's
Oh.
right here.
Should be this one.
That should be
Okay.
that one, right. So basically what it's saying is, I have no idea what you're doing, so I'll just return the name of the function.
Okay.
Okay. So if we go through this real quickly, and then we'll do kind of a practice thing. This is real close to what the assignment is. It's just tips, right? If you think about a tip, what would you pass in? You need to know the amount, right, of the tip, the amount of the meal, the percentage of the tip. You guys know how to calculate a percent?
Yeah.
Just do, if it's 15%, you just do times 0.15. So, and then maybe also, so if you bring in the amount and the amount of the tip, if you want to, you can talk about tax and then just add them all up to the different amounts so that you have the amount, the tip, the tax, and the total. So it's just a matter of creating some methods to do that and then call it in a main. So, and it'll be kind of like this. As I said, one of the things, and as you can tell, I'm a little vague on it still. It's something I've done. I've written them many times, but I really don't like the fact that you have to pass self all the way through. That being said, it's a minor inconvenience. And it works. So I often forget the self in different places. Everything that is class level basically needs a self dot in order to designate it as class level. Otherwise, it's only method level. Does that make sense? Only function level. So you don't have to have everything say self dot before you, if it's only internal to that function, you don't have to worry about it. But if it's something that you want the whole class to see, you have to do a self. And not only for variables, but also for methods, which I often forget. But you have to designate self to make it see the whole, the method.
So that's the purpose of self. It designates something as class level.
It designates something that belongs to the class itself. Does that make sense? Not that this is relevant right now, but if you do this in C# or Java, the variable is this, but you don't have to use it. You can do it to differentiate something that's local versus something that's remote. Right. So the other thing I want to talk about is just how you call. So here we just did some inputs. To call the class, all you have to do is give it a name equals the class. The confusing thing that I probably shouldn't have done is I used the same word. And as I said, you'll see this is fairly typical, but it may not be the best practice because it can be confusing. It's really important that this one be lowercase if this is lowercase. And it's really important that this case match the case of the class name, right? So that has a capital M up there. This one has to have a capital M. This is the class name. We're passing in two variables. This one is the local variable name. You could call it M if you want, right? It doesn't have to be called mileage. Yeah. Now, one of the things is that you can't, like if I were to do this as a capital M here, it would be confused between which is the class and which is the variable. It wouldn't know which is which. And Python doesn't, it gives you errors, but they're not necessarily always the most readable errors. So, does that make sense? Let me bring up the peer exercise I just wanted to do, and then we'll look at the assignment again a little bit briefly, and I'll probably let you work on it today and possibly Monday. I don't know. Or Tuesday. We make Tuesdays, don't we? So we don't have a class on Thursday because it's Thanksgiving next week. So we're getting toward the end, but we're also getting we don't have much more to do. There's this class one, and there's one more thing with lists. Again, I'll try to show you some other stuff, but probably should have done this beforehand. All right, so let's go down to, oh, good. Just a note up there that the winter shells have been created, so I can start working on those, because I changed things. I'm not teaching this one again in the winter. I would like actually to teach it 2 or 3 times in a row to work out the bugs of my Python knowledge. But I'm not teaching it next quarter. So let's do assignments. And go down to the last. So there's a peer assignment 8. And probably, so I think there will be one more quiz, and I'll try to do the final. I'll actually try to write it this week, and so that it'll be there. And it'll be just like the midterm. There'll be multiple times through. Hopefully I won't make any mistakes on assigning what's the right answer. But that'll be it. So we have one more assignment after 7. There's basically 2 more assignments left. There'll be one more quiz, and then that final, which will be, again, it'll be 3 times through at least, and you can ask me questions if you want. But let's look at the peer assignment 8. This is in the book if you have the book. It's the number 11 on page 360. And basically it's to create a card class. And it should have an init that takes in the self, as always, rank and suit. The rank is 1 to 13 because there's 13 cards in each suit, right? And then the suite, their suit is a character. They just said to do it as D, C, H, or S for diamonds, hearts, clubs, or spades. If you want to enter words, I don't know if you have to reduce it to just the letters. It has the methods to get the rank. The rank is, between 1 and 13. Get the suit, which will be added there at the beginning. And then the value. And the value is basically aces are 1s, and all the other cards are their own value except the face cards, which are 10, 11, 12, 13. Anyway, they're worth 10. It's actually, if
Jack,
you,
Queen, King.
what?
So
Yeah,
11, 12,
there's
13.
Jack, King, Queen, so there's 3. 3 of them are worth 10 points. So that'll take a couple of if statements, basically, right? I might just to show you, although I'm not sure if it kind of relates to our last assignment. It's not too hard to create a deck of cards and then shuffle them and then be ready to play some kind of game.
Oh, so do we need like the random number generator?
Not for this. This one you just create any card and then just initialize it if you're wrong. It's not meant to be horrifically difficult. And we'll talk about it in a minute. Can you see the whole thing there? I think it does. It's all there. Oh, so the strings, there's also a string function at the bottom that returns the name of the card. And again, you only have to do one card. When I do these, create these cards by loops, I usually leave out the name of the card. Although you could do that. So I'll give you, how long do you want? 10, 15, 20 minutes? Yeah, you can work together. Actually, the whole idea of why your assignments is.
Oh, no, I was asking her.
Yeah.
Like clock out?
Yeah.
And you can upload these when you're
Wait,
done.
did you already get it done? Oh, wait,
No,
that's-
no, I just.
These
try
are
to
worth
do
5
this.
points. So.
Oh, okay.
And again, the
Try
points
to
are
do, try to do
whether you
assignments,
succeed or not.
right? Mhm. Oh, it's hard. It's very long. Listen. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, assignment.
I'm going to stop the video, I think.